First part of our exploration in memory, which is Module 22, Studying and Encoding Memories. So what is it memory? What is it and how is it measured? Memory is the persistence of learning over time through the encoding, storage, and retrieval of information. Evidence of memory is recalling information, recognize it when we see it, or relearning it more easily on a later attempt. Three measures of memory retention include recall, which is a measure of memory in which the person must retrieve information learned earlier, as on a fill-in-the-blank test. Recognition, a measure of memory in which the person identifies items previously learned, as on a multiple-choice test. Or relearning, a measure of memory that assesses the amount of time saved when learning material again. This is the infamous Hermann Ebbinghaus' retention curve. Ebbinghaus found that the more times he practiced a list of nonsense syllables on day 1, the less time he required to relearn it on day 2. The speed of relearning is one measure of memory retention. Tests of recognition and of time spent relearning demonstrate that we remember more than we can recall, and the chart shows as the rehearsal increases, the relearning time decreases. How do psychologists describe the human memory system? Psychologists use memory models to think and communicate about memory. The first is the information processing model. It compares the human memory to computer operations, and it involves 3 processes, including encoding, storage, and retrieval. The connectionism information processing model focuses on multi-track parallel processing, the processing of many aspects of a problem simultaneously. It views memories as products of interconnected neural networks. Atkinson and Shiffrin in 1968 developed a 3-processing stage for including memory. First, we record to be remembered information as a fleeting sensory memory, the immediate, very brief recording of that information. From there, we process information into short-term memory, an activated memory that holds a few items briefly, where we encode it through rehearsal. Finally, the information moves into our long-term memory, the relatively permanent and limitless storehouse of the memory system of knowledge, skills, and experiences for later retrieval. Working memory involves newer understandings of short-term memory. It focuses on the conscious, active processing of incoming auditory and visual spatial information and of information retrieved from long-term memory and is handled by a central executive. This is the working memory model of Alan Baddeley. It includes a visual and auditory rehearsal of new information, and the hypothetical central executive or manager focuses attention and pulls information from long-term memory to help make sense of new information. An example, in auditory rehearsal, we may mentally repeat a person's name. The visual spatial information, we may mentally picture someone, and the central executive will focus that attention and help promote us the information not only into long-term memory, but hold it into working memory. We typically talk about 2 different types of memory in terms of the actual information, explicit and implicit memories. Explicit memory, also called declarative memory, is memory of facts and experiences that one can consciously know and declare. We encode explicit memories through conscious, effortful processing. Implicit memory, which is also called non-declarative memory, is the retention of learned skills or classically conditioned associations independent of conscious recollection. We encode the implicit memories through automatic processing without our awareness. So what information do we process automatically? Implicit memories include procedural memory for automatic skills and classically conditioned associations among stimuli. Information is automatically processed about space, time, and frequency. An example of this is if you are writing. You do not have to consciously tell yourself how to make the letters. You already have the procedural memory that will allow you to write something on a piece of paper with very little mental effort. Automatic processing happens effortlessly. With experience and practice, learned skills such as reading and driving become automatic. Many skills are developed this way. How does our sensory memory work? Sensory memory feeds our active working memory, recording momentary images of scenes or echoes of sounds. Two types of sensory memory are iconic memory and echoic memory. In this Sperling activity, this is an example, is in sensory memory, our first stage is forming explicit memories. In iconic memory, the picture image memory of visual stimuli lasting no more than a few tenths of a second. The echoic memory, sound memory of auditory stimuli, can be recalled within 3 or 4 seconds. So when George Sperling flashed this group of letters similar to this for 1/20th of a second, people could recall only about half the letters. But when signaled to recall any one row immediately after the letters had disappeared, they could do so with near perfect accuracy, which means that there are two different types of memory involved. What is our short-term memory capacity? It is thought that we can only hold 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information. This activated memory that holds a few items, such as the 7 digits of a phone number while dialing, but the information is stored or forgotten. Newer understandings of our short-term memory that stresses conscious active processing of incoming auditory and visual spatial information and of information retrieved from long-term memory is working. George Miller proposed the magical number 7. People can store about 7 bits of information, give or take 2. Baddeley and colleagues have confirmed that without distraction we can recall about 7 digits or about 6 letters or 5 words. Capacity varies by age and distractions at time of memory tasks. Newer understanding of short-term memory that stresses conscious active processing of incoming auditory and visual spatial information and of information retrieved from long-term memory is called short-term memory capacity. This capacity varies by age and distractions at time of memory tasks. What are some effortful processing strategies that can help us remember new information? Chunking is organizing items into familiar manageable units. This often occurs automatically. Mnemonics are memory aids, especially techniques that use vivid imagery or organizational devices. The PEG word system harnesses our superior visual imagery skill. An example of a mnemonic device might be to use the word face, F-A-C-E, which would help you to remember notes on a musical staff. Hierarchies are organization of items into a few broad categories that are divided and subdivided into narrower concepts and facts. The spacing effect, which encoding is more effective when it is spread over time. Distributed practice procedures produce better long-term retention than is achieved through mass study or practice, and mass practice, in contrast, produce speedy short-term learning and feelings of confidence, but those who learn quickly also forget quickly, and that was one of the reasons why I said we want to read our textbook more frequently, shorter duration, and that is an example of the spacing effect and distributed practice. The testing effect indicates that enhanced memory after retrieving, rather than simply rereading information, it's repeated self-testing using the retrieve it and testing effect questions in this text, for example, does more than assess learning, it improves it. Practice may not be perfect, but smart practice and occasional rehearsal with self-testing makes for lasting memories. What are the levels of processing and how do they affect encoding? Verbal information processed at different levels, which affects our long-term retention. Shallow processing encodes on a very basic level, such as the word's letters, or a more intermediate level, the word's sound. Deep processing encodes semantically, based on word meaning. The deeper and more meaningful the processing, the better our retention. Effortful processing and explicit memories, making material personally meaningful. New information is processed easily when it is meaningful or related to our experience. Ebbinghaus estimated that learning material meaningfully requires 1/10 of the effort compared with learning nonsense material. We have especially good recall for information we can relate to ourselves, a tendency referred to as the self-reference effect. The amount of information remembered depends both on the time spent in learning it and on your making it meaningful for deep processing.